Before we actually get into the review of the movie, I just want to talk about Daniel Craig's Bond era because it's been a very mixed bag for me. I think Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace were very good films. However, Skyfall and Spectre just weren't good films. They bore me. They were just useless. And now we got this film, which surprised me. Bond has always been sophisticated and quite suave, whereas Daniel Craig doesn't really bring that to the table. His Bond has always been kind of a generic action hero for me. It's never quite felt the same. An example of that would be in Skyfall when he looks at a woman and she tells him that she's been sex trafficked and he decides to just look at her and then sleep with her. It felt really out of place and quite creepy, and like he hasn't got that like seduction technique. He just comes off as a bit weird when he sleeps with the girls. He only kind of had a rapport with Eva Mendes's character and the one from Quantum. All the rest of the girls that he kind of meets with in the series doesn't really work. It is improved in this movie, but in the other ones, it just didn't work for me. Leads on to some of my dislikes to this movie. It was quite a long movie and it felt long. There was a lot of bits where they were just talking and they were just kind of getting to grips with things and what was actually happening within the plot. It's not completely negative because all of the time that they were doing that, it worked quite well because it was kind of pacing it out and you were kind of getting a different side to each character, like especially when Bond was calling M out for all the stupid stuff he did throughout this movie. Quite a few things that were just predictable in this movie, like the explosion at the beginning I saw coming a mile away, and also a character's death. There was no like foreshadowing or anything like that. It just suddenly happened. But at that moment, I could just tell before it actually happened what was going to happen because it wasn't subtle at all. Start off with a flashback at the beginning of the movie, which is good because it sets up the villain for the movie. But I think it could have been handled better because he gets reintroduced midway through. And I think when he meets up with Madeline halfway through the movie, she could have had a flashback and that could have actually led us into who he actually is. And then for the first half of the movie, be like this mystery person who's just there, but you don't quite know who they are. Also, it kind of ruins the pacing a bit because you get the introduction at the beginning to the villain and then you get Madeline's and Bond's introduction. So you have an introduction and then you now have another introduction. It's not done well. You start the movie and then you start the movie again. It just doesn't really work. But there were quite a few things I actually liked in this movie. The whole thing with Madeline and Bond having this falling out and not being together anymore. I thought it was going to be some really, really stupid secret that they were showing in the trailers and stuff like that. But it wasn't. It was actually done really, really well and it actually made a lot of sense in the context of things on why Bond stopped trusting her. I also love the fact that Bond doesn't actually meet the villain until like the third act. Most of the time, especially in Spectre, Skyfall, he meets them halfway, and throughout like in Casino Royale, you could literally see that as soon as Daniel Craig would meet a villain, he would literally kill them. That there would be no purpose to them living anymore. But in this, he doesn't have the opportunity because he meets him right at the very end, and he doesn't even have the upper hand, which I thought was brilliant. The villain in this is just so clever. Like Spectre tries to be clever where it says, oh yeah, you know, I was behind everything this whole time. It just doesn't come off as genuine because it's such a retcon. Whereas in this, it doesn't try to say I was the villain all along. It's plain as day that this person is behind the scenes of this movie pulling strings, and it doesn't have to wrap the whole Daniel Craig era up into a nice little bow. It's just a very good self-contained movie. It does reference the previous one, and it actually makes me like Spectre a little bit more because of how Blofeld interacts with Bond and all the things that Spectre does in this movie. It's actually genuinely clever. I was expecting with the new cast to kind of have a rift with the old lot and there to be quite a lot of tension, but they actually played really, really well with each other. The new Double O, she was awesome. She was very cool. She had kind of this fieriness about her that played very well against Craig's gruff demeanour. Speaking of which, the Bond girls are back. In this, you had the best Bond girls that we've had since the whole Craig era. As I said, I enjoyed the new Double O. You also had Madeline, who I actually really liked in this movie, just for her interactions with other people, because it just made me care about the character. She was kind of shoehorned into the previous movie, but in this one, she's actually quite a developed character and she has her own things. Like she's a psychologist for Blofeld, so it adds a whole new layer to the character, as well as having a history with the new villain. Also have my favourite, the brunette at the bar. I can't remember what her name is, but she's so happy to like have this first mission and kind of like giddy about it. And it just adds a new kind of feel to the film because you haven't had someone like really excited to do a mission and stuff like that. And again, because Bond is quite this gruff character, and you have all these different females kind of bouncing off, it works so well because not only does it complement Bond in what he's doing, but it also complements them as well. So I'm going to spoil a few things now, so if you haven't seen it, so you can skip to the timestamp above where you'll see my overall thoughts on the movie. So before watching this movie, I actually got spoiled about the ending where Bond dies, and I'm not too sure if I would have seen it coming because he gets poisoned by the villain, and then he kind of has to open these blast doors up on this secluded island to let the missiles destroy the actual poison. It was a nice finale to the series, and it didn't feel like forced because you couldn't have Bond going off with Madeline again and having a happy ending. It just wouldn't have worked. So this kind of setting off was the best that it could have been. Leave that they killed my favourite character. They killed Felix, my boy. He has been the highlight of all of these movies for me. Every single time he's in one of these movies, I love it. But such a poor death. Because you could see it coming a mile away that he was going to die. And he gets shot. And like, okay, he's going to die, he's going to die. And then they kind of drag it out for like 10 minutes. And it's not until like the very end, where he's been bleeding for who knows what, and off scene, that he just dies. And then he just sinks to the bottom of the sea. I'm like, oh, damn. Yeah, that I felt that because, as I said, he's been a joy throughout the whole series for me. He's been the highlight. He's always got this kind of, this edge to him. And he kind of brings a levity to the series you don't have. Especially when him and Bond were just sharing drinks. It was nice just to see Bond in the open. You don't generally see that. You usually just see him on a mission or something like that. But that wasn't him on a mission. He was just having a break and he was just having some drinks with a mate. And it worked perfectly. Honestly, I was not expecting to enjoy this movie when I went in there. I was expecting it to have something like Skyfall and Spectre, where it was going to be this whole big fluffy thing where the whole thing had to be an overarching narrative or something like that. But it wasn't. It was a very good self-contained movie that you don't need to watch anything else for. And I'll be honest, I'm not too sure if it's my favourite or not. It might be my favourite of the Daniel Craig era. I need to watch Quantum again, but I love this movie. I think it was the perfect send-off, and it's easily the best performance that Daniel Craig has done in the role. It was amazing. I loved every second of it. Yes, it was a long movie, but the payoff was spectacular. It was awesome.